Hello, everyone. It is January 17th, 2024. That needs to be fixed. I'm going to do that right now. I always forget to update my dates. Alrighty. So, yeah, it's January 17th, 2024. This is the only page for this week. A lot of cool stuff happening. Number one, API docs have been updated courtesy of Madeline. And click on this, I can show you what they look like. So, this is what our new API docs look like. Here we can see everything organized by interface. So from accelerometer, it's all alphabetical. Analog digital converter, you can see a couple of the APIs here for it, and then one of the structs that's inside of it. We have this for basically everything. We also show here the utilities, as well as that go along with certain interfaces, and so on and so forth. We have quite a few of them down here. You can see a lot more of the utilities for like serial, and I think that's all some for I2C as well. Yeah, I2C as well. So there's that. You can see kind of how this looks. I'm going to see if there's a way to turn off dark mode. Just kind of see light mode, what that looks like. So this is what light mode looks like. So I don't blind you guys, I'll go right back to dark mode. You can see that we also have categories for things like soft drivers and utilities, so you can look at them directly and on their own. Little note here that's really nice. The bit libraries, the bit limits, enum, map, math, move interceptor, and stuff like that. The cool thing here is also that you can do something like this, like write I2C, and the first item you're probably going to get is going to be write I2C, which is write I2C. So that's really nice. The search is really nice. Let's say I want to go to can. Let's see what happens if I look up can. Okay, well I got quite a few can things. Got can boss on, can ID. Let's see, do we have any, I don't think there's actually any utilities for it. So maybe I'd probably be looking for the can router stuff. So let's see, router. I don't think I see anything can router related. So yeah, but for the most part, this is pretty good. This is fantastic. I really like how this looks. I think it's really easy to kind of look through. Here's an example of seeing inline RST restructured text, basically. So in the actual documentation, when you're writing them up in the source code, you can add warnings, you can add notes, you can add quite a few other things to make it easier to for the reader on the documentation to be able to understand it. It also should be reasonably easy for someone who's reading the code itself to be able to understand what's happening as well. But yeah, this is great. I really love this. I like how it looks. This is awesome. So a bit of a round of applause for Madeline. And she spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on making sure this worked really well. So good work to her. Next up, we have libhal Google and license update. So I should probably put like the libhal logo with the G on it right over here, just so we can see the difference. But basically, what I've done is I no longer work at Google. My last day was yesterday, and with that, I can do a whole variety of different things. One, they state in their guidelines that you're allowed to remove the CLA, which is really awesome and nice. It means that we don't have to be notified, or we're not really forced to. We no longer have to be notified that the code that we're writing is by Google, and that we have to make sure everyone who's using the code and writing to the code is Google, or gives permission to give all rights to Google for their code that they write for this repo. I took all of the old repos and I moved them over to libhal Google. From there, I then forked all of them off back over to libhal. What this does is you cannot just change the copyright of any code that you just go around and find. You can't just go into someone's repo and just start updating their copyrights. That's not something you can do. And if you took over someone else's repo and they already had previous copyright, unless you get permission from them to change the copyright over, you're not allowed to change copyright over. Google is usually pretty lax when it comes to open source, but just to make sure we did the right thing, I made sure to move everything over into its own repo or its own organization, and then forked everything back out. And I've also updated all the notices as well. All the previous commit messages still have the old Google notices because those were licensed under Google. You cannot change history, but going forward, we can change the copyright holder. Currently, it's under my name, just so that I can change it in the future. I I guess I can say that if anything were to happen to me, and I could not actually update the licenses in the future, I'll say that, in a verbal way, Denise Cerna or Leah Labor are people that can basically change the license, a copyright over to whatever else makes sense. The expectation is that it'll be a copyright of the people who are part of the libhal organization. But again, I want to make sure that I'm not opening up a can of worms by giving that kind of control, because I might let's say we add someone else in the future and being a crazy person, they end up doing some weird stuff with the project. So yeah, that's been updated. Oh, and yeah, the same rules about keeping a license, like the Apache notification on each file, still gonna be required. But yeah, it won't be under Google anymore. And then lastly, we have a couple of interfaces that Corey Kelly brought in, which is Angular velocity sensor and current sensor. So Angular velocity is which you'd expect. It returns back the instantaneous Angular velocity of that driver, whatever is giving you that information. So every time you call the read function, it'll return back to you Angular velocity. Same thing with current sensor. You call it, and it gives you back the current. This also reminds me of the fact that there's something that Davi made a comment about a while back, which was we don't have APIs for high-speed stuff. For example, we might get a single current, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, hey, I want to get I have a buffer. I can hold up to 1,000 current readings. Here you go. Here's the buffer, and it gives me a time series of the current over the last certain amount of time, or maybe in some asynchronous way, we give it that information, we give it that data, and then later on it tells us hey, here you go, the data is all there. I need to get more insight into what's necessary for these type of things. From what I gathered, if you're doing calibration stuff, you're just kind of trying to get as much data as you can as quickly as possible. Usually, maybe not even quickly, but you want to make sure you get a lot of good information that's time-wise next to each other, so then you can do some analysis and calibrate from there. That's a different story than I need to get the information as quickly as possible, and I need to chunk it out. So figuring out how to do those will be important in the future. But for now, these are perfectly fine. We only really need, for most use cases for the robotics and for most developers, just what is the current temperature, what is the current temperature, the current sensor, or the current angular velocity. When I say current, I don't mean current like electricity. I just mean the current thing that you're working with. And yeah, that's pretty much the bi-weekly meeting notes for today. Now, I was going to go over libhal 3.0 CI and developer flow. Developer flow has changed a bit. I'll give a quick little thing. I kind of said this before, but the idea is that the command that you would run would be something along the lines of Conan build dot, just to say I want to build this directory. And then after that, you then put in the compiler you want to use, as well as also the platform you want to develop for. If writing in those two different sections is a bit too long for you, you can create your own profile and put those both, you can import those into your profile and then just do -PR, the name of your profile. If that is still too much for you, and you know that you're only really going to be working with that particular platform for most of your work, you can just set it as your default. I'm going to keep thinking about ways to make this simpler. I'm also going to consider what is the most developer-friendly way to go about setting up the defaults in this way, such that you can still do most of your other work. Because once you make that your default, you can't run unit tests because unit tests need to be run on the host. So there's some things you have to consider. But again, I'll go over more of that probably in the next 2 weeks as we get more of that stuff going. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Nope.
Cool. All right, then. I will see everyone on the video next week.